we will now move to our first substantive motion on the agenda, which, of course, is the heart and soul of this party, and that is independence. The motion was originally to be proposed by Kelly McCaskill, our new leader, and seconded by Angus Brendan McNeill. But we thought we'd make Angus work for his new membership and set him off with a 5-minute speech to get us started. Angus will now propose the motion on independence for ALBA. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you. Lovely. Just to say, 5 minutes translates into Gaelic to about 7 or 8 minutes. That's actually what it translates into. Taplin, Martin Va, it's good to be here. As an ALBA member, finally. It did take me a while. I think before the 2021 election, I said that the 2026 election would be the 2021 election for slow learners, but because that would be the election where independence would come to the fore. But perhaps somebody could turn that on me, and given the time I've taken to join ALBA, that I'm perhaps the slowest of slow learners. But who knows? Firstly, I'm very glad to speak on this motion. It's something I wanted to do when I was in the SNP. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to do that in the SNP. You weren't allowed to discuss such matters. I'm glad the ALBA Party, the Party for Independence, is showing the way, and it's good to see my old pal Chris McElhenney in the audience here. Many an hour of exasperation we both spent trying to get things moving in the SNP. But ALBA is the Party for Independence, and it was incidentally my first suggestion to a newspaper when I joined. ALBA for Independence, not so much a rebranding, more a run sealing. It says what it does in the tin. And AI is, of course, the future now. ALBA for Independence. And Keir Starmer says AI is the future. I could find a better salesman, I do agree. Maybe Craig or somebody will come forward and do that. Before I go too much further, I'd like to say a bit more about my old party and the many within the party who like this matter, and I do know they would like it discussed at their conference. I hope that will happen soon, because I think the membership there would vote to make the 2026 election about independence, but the signs are I think they're going to be thwarted. But ALBA is the coming force, and we're doing it, and AI will be the future, and it will say so too. But we have to face a fact in Scottish politics that the SNP need us to be there if anything's going to happen in the next Parliament. And we have to face the fact too that we need the SNP as things stand. That might be a challenge to some of us, but we shouldn't be afraid of that if we want to meet the challenge of independence. And remember, I personally was technically chucked out of the SNP, out in my bahuchi. But who cares really about such things when we're on about independence? There are still many good people in the SNP, that's a fact. But some of us yet may join us, and we will hopefully welcome them if they do, if things don't improve for independence within the SNP. We will still, of course, criticise each other's policies and the way we behave and the way we make arguments. If we see a flaw in the SNP's hierarchy, we will say so. If we see a flaw in their commitment to independence or their lack of pronouncements of independence, unless there's an election around the corner, of course, we will complain about that. And to try and suppress that is akin to something that happens to dissidents, but from those of a dictatorial bent who've done that for eons, or a few on social media who can't stand plurality. Now, for my 5-minute starting, Taz. The substance
Angus is a first-time speaker. We'll give him some leeway.
I'm noting who's applauding and not applauding. I must keep me in mind, you, Chris. The substance of matters. This motion on the UK Supreme Court in November 2022 opened the door, perhaps unwittingly by them, of using Scottish elections or any elections to be used for independence in the reasoning of blocking the referendum in paragraph 81. They blocked the use of a referendum for devolution to be held by the devolved Westminster Parliament at Holyrood, and that's what Holyrood is. It's a devolved Westminster Parliament. It would force the Westminster Parliament to respect democracy and therefore have implications for the Union, which of course would likely be independence. And because it was devolved, it wasn't given that competency, and therefore the Supreme Court said they couldn't do it. But the Supreme Court in paragraph 81 conceded a number of things. They said that democracy carried an authority, and the even if the UK government had not given any political commitment to act on it, regardless of the status of the referendum, the expression of the will of the people would have consequence in a democratic culture. Now, that's crucial. Therefore, it's a ticket, it's a route to independence, is the ballot box. And we can use the ballot box for a referendum, for an election, to move to independence. Now, privately, when I was at Westminster, many Tory and Labour MPs agreed on that point. I got most disagreement, actually, from SNP MPs who felt they couldn't do it until Nicola pronounced they could. And then I had Pete Wishart and Stephen Flynn privately telling me that I was right. I hope they still hold to that position. We shall. I await maybe further agreement from or further validation. But I also found out that, or discovered at the Liaison Committee, that the then UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak didn't disagree either on the concept of independence being achieved at an election. After all, which Democrat wants to be like Lukashenko or Putin? So the real reason the Supreme Court stopped the referendum was because an answer for an independence would be unstoppable by any court or parliament, in the same way that in 2014 the majority won there too. It's also been established that an extraordinary Scottish election can be called by a majority of MSPs under Section 3(1)A of the Scotland Act by amending the two-thirds rule at the Parliament. The House of Commons Library backed that opinion to me when I was an MP, and it was very unfortunate at the time that the former SNP leader and First Minister misled our party and its elected representatives on that fact during a crucial period, to the point of actually refusing legal advice on the matter, which I found really extraordinary and very strange. So we could have a Holyrood election at any time. Currently, that's within the power of the SNP, because that's where the majority of nationalist votes sit. They have them, and they have that command of that majority at Holyrood. Or else we do it at this election coming, which is the policy of this motion and other elections. There's a note of caution, of course, in all this. Life is short, life in politics is shorter still, and life in political power is shortest of all. Obviously, we have an opportunity in 2026, but if all the parties of independence don't sort their houses out by then, we might need an extraordinary general election, an extraordinary Scottish election during the 26 to 31 Parliament, a lifeboat for independence. But of course, that would need a majority of pro-independence MPs, MSPs at Holyrood. The SNP is currently not in a good place to make the 2026 election about independence. I'm reliably informed of that from people quite well placed within the SNP. They have difficulties with some of the policies they've passed and, of course, the law. Apparently, the leadership's all quite shell-shocked, and they're trying to get some stability and confidence back amongst themselves. So don't expect the SNP to be making the 2026 election at this stage, unfortunately, about independence. So it's vital that the 2026 elections, that independence list votes in particular, aren't wasted in helping Labour, Tories and now probably Nigel Farage reform. In the 2021 and 2016 elections, many SNP votes were totally thrown in the bin. In the last election in 2021, 6 of the 8 regions, the SNP votes were entirely wasted. In 2 other regions, they yielded just 1 list seat each. That's 500,000 votes for an SNP list seat. Labour and the Tories got their seats for only 24,000 votes. So 40 to 50 anti-independence party MSPs sit because pro-independence votes were wasted. Now, if we get the public to understand that their vote can be 9 times more powerful, at least, by voting ALBA, I think that the independence-leaning public and voters will come to ALBA on the facts and on the arithmetic of the situation. And what could ALBA have done? Let's say they'd won in 2021. Well, they could have held the SNP's feet to the fire after the Supreme Court, like some of us tried when we were within the SNP. And we could have perhaps had an election. Let's pick a random date, the 19th of October 2023. We might have had an election on independence then, because after all, if you thought you could win independence at a referendum on that date, you'd surely have won independence at an election on the same date. The voters surely weren't going to change their minds on independence because the abstract name of the event was different. It was an election, not a referendum. So we've established, with the help of the UK Supreme Court, we can use elections for independence. Nobody says we can't. The international community will accept whatever the Scottish people accept, and the Scottish people accept democracy, as we saw in 2014. We accept that 2 million from 5 million voted to stay in the UK won the day, with 1.6 million voting for independence. And it would have been accepted with grace had it gone the other way too, and that's what we will expect at an election in the future, which is the only way we can have a democratic event on independence. But colleagues, I want to leave you with a thought more general on that. I think we've established that we can use elections for independence. It's clear we can use elections for independence. Democracy is prime. It carries authority. Something occurred to me quite recently when I saw an SNP MSP standing down. There's quite a number of them, but one said that they were going to continue with independence as their lifetime goal. Well, for me, independence is not a lifetime goal, and I'd argue it shouldn't be a lifetime goal for you either. Independence should be about a 2-year goal to perhaps a maximum 5-year goal for us all. It's achievable in this time, very achievable in this time. And that's what ALBA wants to achieve with this motion. Scotland needs to move on. We need to move on from the austerity and the cuts of Westminster. Ireland did it. It left the UK. It has a government now awash with cash and an economy that is better for its citizens because it makes better decisions for its citizens. And its growth, which is the problems the Chancellor has this week, is 4 times that of the UK. Independence clearly works, and independence from the UK seems to work best of all. Tap alive. ALBA for independence.
Thank you, Angus. I now call on our party leader, Kenny McCaskill, to second the motion on independence. Kenny.
Thank you. I was always happy to defer to Angus's wisdom and eloquence in Westminster. He was a great friend of Alec, and he is a huge asset to our party. Independence, as we were saying, it's his cause as it's ours. It's his as it's our raison d'etre, our very being. It's what drives us on. It was Alec's dream, and it's now our duty. Angus has been laying out the how and the why, and I'll be commenting in a speech tomorrow upon it. But this is also fundamentally about us. It's about independence that's in our very soul. It's what drives us on. There have been dark days for both our country and indeed for individuals who have sought to seek Scottish independence, not simply after 1707. As our bard Rabbie Burns commented on in the 18th century, some feared for Scottish identity. North Britain, as we see in this capital city, was on the mark. North British was to supplant the Scottish identity, but it never happened. People kept the dream alive. The dream never died. Many people believed in it. I remember reading the biography of Tom Johnson, arguably the greatest Secretary of State Scotland ever had. Tom Johnson said he was supportive, sympathetic to independence. He just thought they had to sort out the economy first. I know young Brian Leishman, the MP for Alloa and Grangemouth. He's doing a sterling job in Westminster and Grangemouth and other issues. And I keep saying to Brian, we can't sort out the economy without independence. Tom Johnson, Dennis Canavan, Jim Sillars have all realised that. To get the economy, to get the society, we need independence. That dream was kept alive. It came again in the 1970s when folks saw with oil an opportunity for a transformation. The sort of country Scotland should have been and should be is what Norway currently is. They got oil and they used it. We got oil and we saw it used in Iraq and to create mass unemployment. That's why we went on, but Alec drove us forward. He took us into 2014 when we came so close. They were dark days. I remember in the 19th of September just how it felt. I remember being interviewed for a job in a government, not a Scottish government job, they never offered me one, but across in Dublin with the Irish government, and they asked me about how I felt. And I said that in the 19th of September, I felt like flying out of Scotland and never coming back. But I had a duty to stay to a constituency, and to keep that light on as it's always been kept along, as Alec kept the cause alive and made it grow, and that's why we came so close in 2014. And we're on the march again. The vote for independence is higher now than it has ever been. Let's remember what it was like in the 70s and 80s when it was viewed as a crackpot idea that would never be achieved. What it was like when the referendum was first agreed to in the early part of the second decade of the 21st century, when they thought that they would crush independence once and for all. We marched forward. Alec took us there. As Alec told me, Ian Paisley said to him when he went down to Westminster again in 2015, "You'll be disappointed you didn't win, but you unscrewed the top of the bottle." The tragedy has been some have allowed that bottle to be tightened rather than screwed it right off. But that's why we go again. We do have to do what Alec was making us. Those of us who heard my eulogy for Alec at the memorial service in our great cathedral in the city, remember I quoted from a official in the East Lothian Council who I didn't know had any belief in independence, but who said he remembered how Alec made him walk tall. That's what we've got to do. We look around this hall and I remember Burns's great quote from the Cotter Saturday night. "From scenes like these, old Scotia's grandeur springs, that makes her loved at home, revered abroad." There are not many of us in this hall. We are few, but there are many out there who believe in that dream of independence, that dream that Alec took us so close to delivering. Our job is not simply to do what we need to do in this hall and get things sorted out for our party. It's to mobilise and galvanise that movement that we know exists, that is now a majority because we were lied to in 2014 and people regret that they were duped. Our job is to work hard in this hall, deliver out there, and to deliver that dream. That's our duty.
Followed by Maggie Chetty. Steve Chisholm. Welcome, Steve.
Morning, conference delegates. You know, the SNP, they do have much to be blamed for. 10 years where independence was put on the back burner. Government diverted down ideological blind alleys rather than addressing what really mattered to people, taking people out of poverty and growing our Scottish economy. But you know what? It's time to stop our criticism. Reach out over the SNP leadership's heads and speak directly to the grassroots members, because they get it. They want independence. They might not be ready to join ALBA, but by God, they're ready to vote for independence in the next election. I remember in 2019, I think I never cried so much since my first girlfriend in primary school left me. And it was a night I never wanted to see again. But despite the setbacks of the last 10 years, we've got in 26 a chance, with polls always over 50% for independence. If we put our petty party politics aside, we reach out, we grab each other's hands, and as one group, one movement, we all get the people that really matter, that want independence, as others have said, those that don't even belong to a party, to vote behind it. It's not a journey of a lifetime, it's a journey to 2026. But let's believe this. If we don't hand out that hand of friendship and get everybody together, and we don't make it in 26, we could be another decade before we get the chance again. We're so close. So here's the brilliant opportunity for ALBA, because we are the declared party of independence, but we are the ones that can take the baton. We're the ones that can reach out, be the ones to bring people together, max the yes vote. And look, let's not be naive. As Alex knew better than most, and by God, there's a big hole in this hall today, he knew that collaboration meant making compromise. So it's not about egos, it's not about us as individuals, it's not about getting everything the party wants, because as we said about our constitution, you can want everything and you can have it, but no, you can't have everything. So let's do what we need to do to get out, reach out to those grassroots members that just want a voice to rally behind and just want to be given hope that 26 can deliver. And it's up to us, the ALBA Party of Independence, to go out and spread that message. So please approve this. Thank you.
I now invite Maggie Chetty to make her way to speak in favour of the motion. Maggie will be followed by Hugh Kerr, who wishes to remit back. Hugh, where are you? Right, sorry. Do you have a seconder to your remit back? I would take one from the floor. I'm always keen to have debate. We can hear the arguments. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Maggie, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, comrades, friends. I would like to echo what Steve has just said. I think there's a whole lot of conflicting things going on at the moment. And the most important thing we have is unity of the indie movement. And I sincerely hope that ALBA will be one of the great architects of that building of unity. That's the thing I think I want to see more than anything. And I would have to agree with what Craig has had to say. We've lost 2,500 members. That is a disaster for a party like ours. We need to reverse that sort of behaviour. We need to change all of that. And I think it is about putting the past behind us and building support. I don't know if any of you saw a letter that I wrote to the National, that was published in the National, about Salvo and Salvo's progress towards the United Nations, which I thought was an absolutely tremendous achievement, hardly covered anywhere in the press, which was one of the reasons that I wrote to the National. But I also sent a copy of the letter to the Morning Star, who, much to my great surprise, printed it with a photograph, and it came up on Twitter and was reposted a couple of hundred times and was viewed 14,000 times, the letter about the progress of Salva to the United Nations in the Morning Star. Astonishing. What that shows me is that there's a tremendous amount of interest, and has always been a tremendous amount of interest in independence. One of the things I learned in 2014 is that there are thousands of people out there, progressive people, people who are not there in parties, who have never joined a party, and who are giving it everything they've got, who gave it everything they had during 2014. So I want to see us giving support to all the strands for Indie, including Salvo and Liberation. I don't come from a parliamentary party tradition. I'm a communist. I've been a communist all my life. And we only ever fought for liberation movements. We were only ever really part of liberation movements. We did put up a few candidates who always got very tiny percentages of the vote, but we mostly, there was no expectation about parliamentary parties bringing liberation. So I think it's really important that we do not seem aloof to the independence movement. The SNP was constantly, the leadership was constantly aloof to the independence movement. And I think it's really important that we are not doing that. AUOB, we have to all be out there. Support for Salvo, liberation, we should be demonstrating that, and we should be putting our hands out. We should have hands across the independence movement. Absolutely have to do it. I put out a plea, let's do it. Let's be the party that fights for independence right across the movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Before I call Hugh Kerr, I wonder if I just may make a point in relation to Maggie's mentioning of losing members. If I can ask members not to pay full attention to those who go on Twitter who know nothing about the party or who may have left the party or why they may have left the party, but to ask us. And many people write in and have chosen, regrettably, to leave because they can't afford to stay a member of this party or indeed any party. People are struggling in Scotland. They have to make choices about how they spend their money. And they regret that they leave, but they still remain in contact with us because obviously we have a supporters base as well. So please don't be driven by comments that would suggest people are leaving us for the wrong reasons. The second point I would like to make is that on Alex's passing, many people were left in a limbo. They didn't know if we would carry on. They didn't know if we were able to carry on emotionally, physically, and everything else. But we are, because we owe it to Alex. And I am confident in my heart and soul that people will see that the passion remains, the determination is as strong as ever, and they'll come back to us in droves when they can afford to do so. Hugh Kerr.
Because I live just round the corner in Porton Square, which is the social housing block of the Quarter Mile. I chair the Residents' Association there, and I have to tell you, we've got quite a few ALBA voters in Porton Square, and I hope that they will add to the members we get at the next Scottish Parliament elections. Now, I've used an old tactical trick, of course, to get Tasmina's attention by saying I want to remit the motion back. I might actually just withdraw that, but at least it ensures that she called me to speak, because I knew everybody else would be in favour. It was a trick I used to use in the SNP. But the serious point I wanted to make is I agree absolutely with everything that's in the motion. I think there should be a little bit extra. Right to talk about our resources, right to talk about independence. But actually, I think in this climate, we want to stress that ALBA is the party of peace, because we are in an increasingly warlike situation. You'll be glad to know that you're in the constituency of Angus Robertson, or as he was known as Angus Who Dares Wins Robertson, because he was the man who proposed that the SNP drop their traditional opposition to NATO and become members of NATO as an independent Scotland. Frankly, that was a disgrace. We lost the vote. I was an SNP member then by not many votes. But ALBA, in this moment of war in Ukraine, in Gaza, and all around the world with an American imperialist thug in charge as president, we must come out and say ALBA wants an independent Scotland that is for peace and for justice and harmony around the world. And we have an SNP, I have to tell you, that not only is in favour of being in NATO, but some of them are in favour of keeping nuclear weapons these days. And some of them have been dressing up in British Army uniforms, going to Ukraine. And some of them want to send Scottish boys and Scottish girls to Ukraine to be killed. Now, in this climate, we must come out and say, no Scottish troops in Ukraine, opposition to all wars, including Ukraine. And also, the biggest, of course, crime that's going on in the world at the present time is the genocide of Israel against Palestine, which is going on a daily basis. And tomorrow there is a march on Palestine from Bute House, from the headquarters of our SNP government, and going to the Meadows just around the corner here. I think it would be very good if this conference decided to go and join for an hour that rally in the Meadows and to say that ALBA is the party of peace and we're with you. We're against genocide in Gaza. We're against the war in Ukraine. We're against nuclear weapons. We're against NATO, and we want your vote next year as the party of peace. However, in the interest of party unity, I withdraw my ribbon back.
I'm sure it won't have passed many people's attention. There's a pattern emerging in the age profile of the people who are using the system to manipulate a speaking opportunity. I would call your card anyway, Hugh. And this is nothing against older men with grey hair. I adore you both. Simply to say, I do like the ingenuity of using a system, and make sure we do that in 2026 when we have that opportunity in that election. And thank you for changing your card. But to restore decorum to this debate, our final speaker will be Josh Robertson, who's going to speak in favour of the motion. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Taz, and I would also like to thank the membership for entrusting me to be the organiser for the year to come. And as I said during the hustings, I promise to deliver everything I can, not just for the party, but for our country, because this election is the most important, certainly, in my lifetime since the referendum. But going on to the motion. Fuel poor, energy rich, freezing pensioners, profiteering energy companies. The contrast is obscene. And the fact that it's allowed is a national scandal, and Ofgem should long been pulled over the coals for allowing runaway tariffs and even greater profits. But those in here knew and warned that the promised change of the Labour government was simply the change from a blue tie to a red one. As a nationalist, when you hear Greg Jackson, the CEO of Octopus, say that Scotland should have regional pricing to make our energy cheapest in the UK, it makes your blood pressure soar. We know, Greg. Finally, someone within the system telling the truth on Scottish resources, standing up for Scotland's right to benefit from them. We've seen this week the lies that came out about 2014 and the untruths that were told. But woe on us, Conference, then, that the best national speaker for Scotland outside of this party on our national energy comes from an English energy baron. But I disagree with Greg on one key point, no, Conference, and it's this. Scotland shouldn't have the cheapest energy of any region in the UK. It should have the cheapest energy of any country on these isles. Not only that, Conference, but I go a step further. It should not just have the cheapest energy on this island, but the cheapest energy in all of Europe. Absolutely. Because Conference, with cheaper energy becomes not just cheaper domestic heating, it's cheaper manufacturing, it's cheaper transport. It's the key that unlocks our country's potential. The scandal isn't just that our energy prices are dearer. The scandal is that we have to deal with the effects of it. Yes, green energy is better for the environment, but that doesn't mean there's no environmental impact. Wind farms leave scars on the landscapes, batteries emit radiation and take up valuable land. The costs, therefore, are not null, and it's inconceivable that we as a nation pay those costs and other communities and other countries reap the benefit. It's not often that countries get two cracks at the whip. The first time we let Thatcher and Westminster decide what our energy bounty was spent on, and what did we get? Trident, war in Iraq, and now the cutting the benefits of the poorest in society. We can't let our futures be ruined by those that have failed us in the past. And that's the same way for the independence movement. The tactical naivety of the Scottish Government of asking the UK Supreme Court for permission to succeed will damage us for years to come. But just because of others' failures in the past doesn't mean that we as a movement or as a party can't lead the way to a better future. Conference, now is the time. Now is the time to stop meekly asking for a referendum, to stop begging for our sovereignty from the very people that benefit the most from keeping us incarcerated. Instead, Conference, now is the time to demand independence, to take a mandate from our sovereign people, from all independent supporting parties, not on how a referendum should be formed, but on how Scotland leaves the bonds of the Union and unleashes our people's potential. Please support the motion. Thank you.
I should say, Maggie, in reference to your speech, I have a resolution that will come before the Conference Committee at lunchtime about the Liberation Scotland petition to the UN welcoming the progress made. So we'll see if the Conference Committee decides to accept that motion. We can hear about it then. We no longer have to take a vote, thanks to Hugh here. So can I ask if the motion on independence be passed by acclaim? We now move to our last motion before lunch, which is on transportation. And there are 2 amendments to it, so there's a number of speakers to go through. Once we hear the initial motion, there'll be 2 proposed amendments. The initial motion is proposed by Ian Cameron to be seconded by Aberdeenshire Laku and or Angus Brendan McNeill. Welcome, Ian Cameron.
Good morning, fellow delegates, freedom fighters and friends. The status of a successful independent country is not measured by its GDP, but by the quality of life enjoyed by every one of its citizens. Transport infrastructure plays a crucial role in shaping the quality of life in any country. Now, some of you have heard me say this before. In a previous motion approved in 2023, I outlined how the Transport Working Group would be working on 2 platforms. One was developing a long-term strategy or vision for the future of transportation in an independent Scotland. And the second one was developing short-term priorities and practical solutions involving pressurising Scottish Government and local authorities to implement improvements. Now, we initially focused on the first platform and successfully had our vision statement adopted as party policy. And just let me remind you of that. It is the right of every citizen of Scotland to have access to an efficient, effective, accessible and affordable transportation system. Now, I now want to focus on the second platform. This is, in effect, a call to action. A robust and efficient transportation system is the backbone of a thriving society, and it enables economic growth, reduces inequality and improves overall well-being. However, Scotland's transport infrastructure has deliberately been disadvantaged and has suffered from serious neglect and underinvestment due to our colonial status. I have discussed before how the rail network in Scotland was decimated by beaching in the 60s. Motorway development was prioritised in England, with Scotland receiving fewer major road projects. Rural and island communities face ongoing transport challenges, particularly in the ferry services and rail connectivity. Our resources have been plundered, our wealth has been stolen, and our population growth has been diminished in real terms. Inadequate public transport, congested roads and unreliable services continue to impact daily life, limiting opportunities for education, employment and social participation. We must start acting now. As a matter of urgency, we need to launch a strong campaign to push the Scottish Government and local councils to prioritise transportation infrastructure. Our strategy must include public engagement, engaging through LACUs with members and to the wider Yes movement and with the public to demand change through petitions, public meetings, street stalls and local campaigns. Direct action. We should be organising demonstrations, car rallies, coordinating with Bridges for Indy and other symbolic acts to highlight the urgent need for investment. Political pressure, working with MSPs and policymakers to ensure transportation remains a top priority in government agendas. And we must use the media outreach, leveraging social media, news outlets and influential voices to amplify our message and shape public opinion. We must connect with the wider Yes movement by emphasising the importance of quality of life and engaging with integrity at grassroots level with other independence parties and individuals. We can bring more Scots into the independence movement and can generate more trust in the ALBA Party. This campaign can go hand in glove with our Scottish election campaign. A modern, efficient and accessible transportation system is a tangible benefit of self-determination, one that will resonate with voters who may be undecided about Scotland's future. I particularly want to emphasise the urgent need for dualling of the A9 and A96 trunk roads in the interest of safety and to enable the development of the Highlands. Investment in new rail links and upgrading of rolling stock. Investment in new ferries and maintenance facilities to improve connectivity throughout the Highlands and Islands and to create direct links to Europe. Investment in a network of undersea road tunnels to improve connectivity between islands and with the mainland, facilitating repopulation and redevelopment of communities. In asking you to support this motion, I am asking you to approve holding a one-day National Assembly to coordinate and launch a campaign of action to improve Scotland's transport infrastructure. I would urge that this National Assembly be held as soon as possible. A prosperous, independent Scotland must be built on the foundation of a high quality of life for all its citizens. Investing in transportation infrastructure is a key part of that vision. The time to act is now. By coming together, engaging with the wider movement and demanding real change, we can create a better Scotland, one that is truly independent in both governance and in the well-being of its people. Thank you.
I now welcome back Angus Brendan McNeill to second the motion and remind him he's no longer a first-time speaker and will be kept to time. Angus.
Being a very good boy and looking for brownie points, I won't even take my 3 minutes, Taz. There you go. Just want to make a quick few points. I think the case has been well made. I'd just like to remind people here that in the islands, RET was a big, big deal. It was a years, decades campaign. Then one fellow came along, Alex Salmond, as First Minister, and within years that impossible dream became a reality. A lot more people travelled to the islands. It's caused its own problem, of course. The ferries are full and the investment hasn't been made in ferries. But things can change in transportation. The other 2 or 3 points I want to make are just about tunnels, which was mentioned. The Lower Thames crossing is earmarked to be about £8.6 billion. We know that will go over budget. Things do in the UK. But in the Faroe Islands, they're building a tunnel 5 times longer. Remember, they have 1% of Scotland's population. 5 times longer at 5% of the cost of the Lower Thames crossing. That's about £16 million a kilometre. The good news of the Lower Thames crossing, it should, I hope, have Barnett consequentials. And in Faroese economics and reality, that would build about 46 kilometres of tunnels in Scotland. Not inconsiderable to help the island communities and rural communities and peninsular communities as well. One other point I'd like to make about tunnels. In the Faroes, I was taken around Tórshavn with the second finest man I know from Greenock, Ronnie Cowan. We were there to see the new undersea tunnel. It was about 8 or 9, maybe 10 kilometres long at the island of Sandoy. But by accident, we were taken on the new bypass road for Tórshavn, and we were driven into a tunnel that was being constructed. They weren't even boasting about this. They were just showing the road. I said, "What's going on here?" They said, "A 2-kilometre tunnel." What's the cost of the 2-kilometre tunnel? It's about 20 million, 10 million a kilometre. I'll raise it to point out that something similar in Argyll, the Rest and Be Thankful cover that's being talked about, is being talked about for the same distance, about £420 million. The Faroese are building a tunnel, not a cover, a tunnel for £20 million. So it's 21 times more costly to do a similar crossing in Scotland. And the final thing I want to say to this, and I'm sure I'm still within my time, Taz, is don't forget EGNOS. It's not something you'd have after breakfast. EGNOS is the European Geostationary Navigational Overlay Service. It's not something you can say before breakfast either. But it's the 3D in the sky for aeroplanes. Why is that important? Because in islands like Barra, where I'm from, the mist level now has to be higher for planes to get in. So we have fewer successful journeys, because rather than be able to go in when the mist is 650 feet, it now has to be up at 850 feet. And that means if the mist is 700 feet, well, it could go in, it can't go in now. That was a consequence of Brexit, 30 million quid. It also means for companies like EasyJet, they can't fully train their pilots in the UK because the UK is the only G20 country without a 3D in the sky service. The great irony is the mast is turned on in Glasgow and in Cardiff, so the one in Cork it can work, so the Irish can have this service on the basis of the two masts, but you can't use it in the UK. So let's remember Agnes, let's remember Brexit. When I did raise this with Boris Johnson at Liaison Committee, he'd never heard of it, but he cancelled it. So there's a lot in transportation. I commend the motion. It's exactly what we need, and a country like Scotland, with its islands, peninsulas, hills and everything else, certainly needs its eye in transportation. I believe.
Thank you. We will now move to the amendments. Amendment 4.1 proposed by Hector MacLeod and seconded by Carol Inglis. Hector is going to propose the amendment. Is Carol here to second? Are you seconding from the floor? Okay, can I have a seconder from the floor? Thank you very much indeed. Welcome, Hector, all the way from Skye. Welcome to Hector.
Thank you, Conference. I'll try and keep this short. This is only a wee amendment, but I believe of huge importance. I agree with everything in the motion. It's great to see the undersea tunnels connecting islands to the mainland on the agenda, and it's great to see us keeping pressure on dualling of the A9 and A96. But Conference, while the dualling of the A9 and the A96 are hugely important, so is the upgrade and maintenance of the A82 and A87, and this amendment looks to add that into the motion. Conference, the A82 is the second longest A road in Scotland. It runs between Glasgow to Inverness, and the A87 is between Invergarry and Uig. Conference, on the A82, one of the most dangerous parts, I believe, of the road is the Tarbert to Tyne-Drum stretch, with the narrow roads and tight corners. And Conference, some of you might remember I made a wee joke at the Inverness conference when I was speaking on roads. I said that in the UK we drive on the left of the road, in the Highlands we drive in what's left of the road. Now, that joke was in reference to the potholes in the Highlands, but the same joke could be made for the Tarbert to Tyne-Drum stretch. If you meet a lorry or a bus on one of these corners, what's left of the road is not very much space. Of course, Conference, the other road, the 87, that leads to Scotland's second most popular tourist destination and God's own country, the Isle of Skye. And in case there's any Visit Scotland watchdogs listening, or Mr McNeil still in the room, other islands are available. Conference, I'm only hazarding a guess here, but I would presume the logical undersea tunnel route to connect the Western Isles to the mainland would be the Dunvegan area on Skye, meaning that the 87 road to Skye would become even more of an important road, as it wouldn't just have to cope with the thousands of camper vans a day, or I believe there's still one camper van impounded, so 999 camper vans. I'd suspect a lot of freight companies would also see this route to the Western Isles as more reliable than the current ferries, meaning more heavy goods vehicles travelling the 87. And Conference, that's something I hope that can be discussed further at the National Assembly. So Conference, I'll finish up by asking you to please support this amendment to strengthen this really important motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. I now call Mike Baldry to speak against that amendment 4.1, if I've read your card correctly. Mike Baldry, thank you.
I support the resolution as submitted, but I do oppose this amendment. I fully understand the need to improve transport to the Highlands, the road system, the long campaign, but the details, where we want to prioritise, should be a matter for the National Assembly. Transportation affects all of Scotland, not just the Highlands. The Highlands has its problems, but so does the borders. Here from Edinburgh, we can travel on dual or motorway standard routes to Aberdeen, Glasgow, Stirling, but to our borders at Carlisle, Berwick or Stranraer, the roads are atrocious. We also need investment in the borders. Even in the Central Belt, the times I travel up to the Highlands, which I do from 3 or 4 times a year, my main delays are not near Aviemore or Dromocta. They are on the city bypass, they're at Broxburn in Perth, on main roads ending roundabouts causing endless delays. We need a coherent transport system for the whole of Scotland. That is what we should talk about at National Assembly. I believe this amendment places excessive emphasis on the Highlands. If we want to improve transport to the Highlands, we could consider reopening the direct Glenfarg railway line. That was shut by the Tory Transport Secretary, Ernest Marples, so the route could be used for the M90 built by Ridgeway Marples. No surprise there. You know, there's a lot we could do, but I say yes, I support the resolution, but I feel the details need to be addressed at National Assembly, and it affects the whole country, not just the Highlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. We now move to Amendment 4.2. To be proposed, I have Fife Lacu, Willie Gavin and Steve Chisholm. Who do we have here? I can see Steve. Do we have somebody from Fife or Willie Gavin? Yes, we do. I can't see. Craig Dempsey, yes. It'll be yourself, Craig, because I remember your name from the amendment. Craig Dempsey to propose and Steve Chisholm to second. Craig Dempsey, do you wish to speak? Yes. Oh, take your time. Take your time.
Morning, Conference. This is a very, very simple amendment. Paragraph is on the main motion. Sorry, I've went and moved my phone. It says to oppose free ports. I have no problem with that. We should oppose free ports. I really think that well, I'm not getting into that. Our amendment looks at the fact we already have a free port in operation in Fife. And it's the 4th free port. It's already there. It's already operating. So what we want to do in our amendment is to try and get something out of the free port. Let the free ports pay for the infrastructure, not the local councils. And look at employment law. As free ports stand, there's no employment law. They should at the very least, have the employment law that every other worker in Scotland has. And that's a simple amendment we want to put down. Thank you.
I now call Steve Chisholm to second proposed amendment 4.2. Steve Chisholm.
Firstly, Conference and delegates, thank you to Fife Lacu for making the amendment and the opportunity to speak. Just to give people comfort to vote in favour of the amendment, let's begin with a simple truth. Scotland's green free ports are not like other free ports, and to claim otherwise is to deny the facts and disregard 4 years of hard and principled work. In the Highlands, that work's identified over £3 billion of investment and is set to create 10,000 jobs. And in Forth in the Fife, it's 7 billion and 19,000 jobs. And no, it's not a jam tomorrow story. In its first year in Inverness, it's secured 750 million of investment and already created 600 jobs. So for the first time in decades, the Highlands and Fife, they're no longer on the sidelines. They're on the world stage as hubs for the global green economy. And to a certain extent, we should be really proud of that. Now, I understand some have doubts, so let's turn to the facts to give some comfort. Workers' rights are at the heart of Scotland's green free ports. The Fair Work Charter demands fair pay at the least at the real living wage, no appropriate zero-hours contracts, constructive dialogue with workers' committees or trade unions, no hire and fire practices, and more. And in health and safety, the law applies, no exceptions. On planning and environmental regulations, no shortcuts. Just ask Sumitomo that are investing 350 million and recruiting right now, who spent hundreds of thousands and took over a year to get their consent. And let's be clear, Green Freeport owns no land. Every site volunteered and registered by its landowner, who retains complete control. And a final word on business rates. The 5 years of non-domestic rates relief is underwritten by government, so the local authorities don't lose out. And in the years that follow, all of those rates are ring-fenced, having to be spent and reinvested in the area of the Freeport or the area in which those people travel to work. And for each Freeport, that's around 500 million to go into infrastructure, amenities and development. But let me say something else that's the really important thing here. We need jobs to lift people out of poverty, to give hope to our young people and to grow our economy. So think about the power of negative messaging, the kind some are spreading online. Think of young lads or lassies ready to put an application in for one of these new jobs, and they're at least on a minimum of 30,000 a year or more. They're good, well-paid jobs. They'll look at that publicity and they may think twice and be put off by claims they'll be paid pennies and denied their workers' rights. And think of those inward investors who are currently flying to London and Scotland to look at investing. Every single week they're coming to Fife and the Highlands. What do we want them to read? Read online that Scotland doesn't want them, doesn't want the money on the jobs. So that kind of rhetoric has real consequences. So it's a simple amendment, but it recognises that Freeports are here. We should make the most of them. We should use our opportunity to make sure that workers' rights are protected, that the money they create is reinvested in their communities. And as Alex wisely said to me, sadly just 2 weeks before his passing, let's make the most of them because they're here. And let's focus on creating an independent Scotland. Because in that independent Scotland, we can have whatever fiscal policies we want to encourage economic growth. So for now, let's have the jobs, and please support the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I have 4 speakers against 4.2. I'll hear in turn, to be followed by Chris Cullen. Councillor Chris Cullen, who will speak in favour of the motion, and I think both amendments. And I'll just give advance notice to the proposer of the amendments. I'll give you the right to sum up. Dhruva Kumar, first of all, to speak against 4.2, to be followed by Morgan Davies, to be followed by Dave Llewellyn, to be followed by Nick Jury. Dhruva, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning. Freeports, the policy when this word comes, I think ALBA is very clear on that, and I had a pleasure speaking with Steve and Rob Thompson and members on this quite lengthy. First of all, let's see the Freeports. Freeport, when it came, the Scottish government itself rejected in the first place. Why is that? I have written in National and North Edinburgh News, my letter being published, so please read there. Is Freeports seriously pose risk to labour's right, Scottish economy, society and independence movement. It itself is big risk. When a Scottish government opposed it, but under pressure from Westminster, they in haste, they accepted and rebranded Freeport as a green ports. The promises of creating 75,000 jobs, £10 million investment, is nothing, again, another GB Energy thing, which employs 0 people. In the best interest of the Scottish independence, Scottish workers' right, investment, economy coming in, job security, local empowerment. When you look into that, the port custom expert, Peter Henderson, he did say that creating the job that is globally displaced, not in the free ports. The subconditions, again, of the workers' rights is quite alarming. ALBA Party condemned the collaboration of Holyrood and the Westminster to endorse Freeport into the green ports. European Union, if you look into that, they condemned Freeport as a hub for illicit trades and the tax avoidance and the means and tools for providing a leverage for not paying employer contribution. In this economical time, we have to be very careful as a party to look into this. What I would say is, please do not forget how Scotland was robbed for more than £500 million by Sanjeev Gupta in the name of creating wealth and bringing the businesses in. So it's time to oppose now, and I would urge everyone to oppose this. Thank you.
I now call Morgan Davies to be followed by Dave Llewellyn and then Nick Jury to oppose 4.2. Morgan.
I listened to disbelief with the seconder for the amendment. It was a bait and switch. The amendment suggested that we should be pragmatic on certain issues when it comes to green ports, when it comes to free ports. And what we got was a request to pass this and to overturn the previous resolutions that National Council had agreed to. National Council, and I know this because I proposed it, we opposed absolutely Scottish green free ports. I sat and listened with disbelief because, according to the Speaker, there's no difference between opening a business in a green free port and opening it anywhere else. All the regulations will apply in the green free port. So why do we have designated green free ports, I was thinking to myself. The reality is that they are not the same. Everybody who has taken an interest in it will tell you that they are not the same. In 2019, the Times described free ports as essentially Singapore-style, tariff-free, low-tax economic zones operating independently of the country in which they are based. The Office of Budget Responsibility itself said that free ports tend to alter the location of economic activity rather than increase its overall volume. Businesses choose to open in free ports because there are benefits to being in a free port area. We don't need free ports. The SNP, in a cynical attempt, thought that putting the word green in front of free ports, I think that's when they were in an electoral alliance with the Scottish Greens, they thought that sticking the word green in front of free ports would make us think, oh, well, it must be good. The SNP, the Scottish Government, should never have gone near accepting it. Their argument that they would be imposed by Westminster might have been true, but they should have just let Westminster get on with it and campaigned against them. Free ports are an attack on the sovereignty of Scotland. They are an attack on our local government. They should be opposed absolutely and completely. We should commit ourselves to getting rid of them if we are ever in a position of power to do so. I urge you to vote against this resolution. You can see that clearly this amendment has been brought to change our opposition to free ports. They didn't have the courage to put a motion in to say we should support green free ports. They slipped it in a transportation motion to try and be pragmatic and say we should accept some, we should call on them to, give some more rights to people. So I say no. I say no to green free ports. I say no to giving away our sovereignty. Vote against this resolution.
I now call Dave Llewellyn to be followed by Nick Jury, who will speak against 4.2.
Right, conference. Basically, I've been part of the Salvo free ports group since it started. Just to let you know, I'm one of the people Steve talks about that's been spreading the rumours. Except the rumours that we started off in a meeting in Inverness 2 years ago with 20 people. We're now talking to unions. They've got memberships of 4 million across the UK. who agree with our position. For instance, right, free ports now weren't introduced by the Scottish Government, they were forced in the Scottish Government by Michael Gove. Michael Gove, little Mr Thatcher. Right, Thatcher brought in the sales of council houses in the 80s. Oh, it's great, you'll all be able to buy your council house, you'll all be able to make some money, you'll all be able to buy some shares, you're all going to be better off. How much is better off now when you can't get a council house? Right, okay, so let's look at who's in charge of the free ports. Nothing against you, Mr Ratcliffe. Mr Ratcliffe has just buggered off down the, excuse my language, he's just headed off back to Monaco, like, with 600,000 quid. 600 million to open his place in Antwerp, while he shuts down Grangemouth, and at the same time, he's getting 2 billion for the British government to redevelop Man United's ground. What's that about? At the end of the day, it's like, who's paying for all these things? At the end of the day, we are. Every single person that sits in a council in this country, every single person gets services for the council, because these are going to suck it out the council. Look at England. Look at Teesside. There are councils going bust all over England because and they've been taken over by private enterprise. Who are the people who are responsible for them going bust in the first place? It's like you cannot let them take hold anyway at all. We've got a policy in ALBA that's any free ports. It needs to be kept that way, and there should be no way out the back doors in the way. I'm quite happy to talk to people about it. I'm quite happy to confess I've spoken to you before. At the end of the day, it's like, look, we all want investment. We all want investment. We want it for everyone. That's the kind of party we are. We look after the last man. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Watch yourself. I now call Nick Dury to speak against Amendment 4.2 to be followed by Chris Cullen, who will speak in favour of the motion. Nick Dury.
Hello, Conference. I'm standing here today speaking against this motion largely as a duty to my LACU, who are fizzing about 4.2. Now, obviously, we've heard about the loss to the tax base and the deregulation, and I think that's all been well covered and well understood by the room. But I should say that I have been empowered to speak very much against this, and it's a collective opinion of the Glasgow LACU Committee, so just know that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. With great pleasure, I welcome Councillor Chris Cullen. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Paz. Good afternoon, Conference. I'm just here to speak for the motion and really a bit about my personal view on this. As part of my other job, I travel the length and breadth of Scotland, working in many different areas, and I can tell the difference in roads and infrastructure and how it affects me in the business. What I really want to highlight is that I really welcome the fact that this will bring a National Assembly to speak on this, because I think that while the motion does highlight what we need to address, it does miss out certain parts, like the forgotten southwest of Scotland. I live in Ayr. I've lived there for 14 years now, and really from you leave Glasgow until you reach Ayr, you've got a dual carriageway. From then on to Stranraer and Cairnryan, which is the main ferry link for freight between Scotland and Ireland. It's onto a dirt track road and a single. This carries over 2,400 vehicles a day, and that's up to around 28,000 vehicles from Cairnryan coming through onto Glasgow, and that's a day, and that's on roads that's not fit for purpose. The S77 itself has had 10 years of continuous roadworks. Most of the time it's just been single lane traffic. It's really affected every village and town along the way, and something more needs to be done. So I welcome this, and I welcome the chance to speak in the National Assembly about this, and I hope you back this motion.
Thank you, Chris. Now, the movers of the amendments are entitled to speak again to address the comments made by speakers relative to their amendments. So I call first Hector MacLeod if he wishes to. He does. Welcome, Hector, and I'll ask Craig if he can get ready to address the questions, if he wishes, in 4.2. So, addressing 4.1, welcome back. Hector.
Hi, Conference. I'll try and be quick again. I agree with the points Mike made and the points Chris just made. There are roads all over Scotland that need attention and basically we need to talk about. But the motion, the original motion, does state that dualling of the A9 and the A96 trunk roads in the interest of safety and to enable the development of the Highlands. So my amendment was only to include the 82 and the 87 in that bit of the safety and development of the Highlands. So, Conference, please don't reject this amendment just because other roads aren't included. Please speak at the National Assembly, include these roads, or bring further motions to further conferences on these roads. Speak to the Transport Group and work with them. But I think, as I said, the 87 and 82 will be really important roads if we get the inter-island tunnels up and running. So they are important to be included in the development of the Highlands. So please support the amendment.
No. So Craig Dempsey is waiving his right to reply to 4.2. We now return to Ian Cameron, who has a right to reply to close the debate on this. Ian, you wish to waive? You wish to speak? Yes, please. Yes. Now would be good, because you're standing between everyone's lunch.
Like to thank all the speakers. I think they've made their points very well, and I certainly, the main point I would like to make about this motion, the main thrust of this motion is to kick off a campaign, is to get to the National Assembly. Now, I've deliberately, I haven't included, well, I've given examples, but I haven't excluded anything, and I haven't included anything. I mentioned the A96 and the A9, probably partially because they're in my own area, and, well, the A96, and also I do believe passionately that every one of our cities in Scotland should be connected by either by motorway or a major trunk road. So that Aberdeen to Inverness and Perth to Inverness. But having said that, there really is, it's down to National Assembly, and I would ask you, for no other reason than to streamline the process and get to National Assembly quicker, I would ask you to reject these two amendments and let's get to National Assembly as quickly as possible, where we can kick off this campaign and we can, everybody is welcome to, to make their point for their own cases, for their own trunk roads, their own ferry systems. Everything can be included. We can have a, we can kick off a campaign. One of the other reasons I thought about the A96 as well, we could possibly get Fergus Ewing involved. I really want to make this a grassroots campaign that we're actually working in conjunction with our Scottish election campaign, where we get people involved at grassroots, we put campaigns in place. We have, I mean, I thought of also one of the things about the part of the campaign with the A9, A96. We could have car cavalcades travelling the length and breadth, coordinated with the Bridges for Indy, meeting up in Inverness, simultaneously going on the A96 and the A9, meeting up in Inverness for a rally. But, we can have people can put forward their own ideas, and we can have public meetings the length and breadth of Scotland. And I'm more than happy to come anywhere in Scotland, to any LACU, to support them and to help with this. But I think this National Assembly is crucial to get this campaign kicked off as quickly as possible. So I would ask you, in the interest of that, to reject both these amendments and to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Ian. Right, Conference, a series of votes. The first vote will be on proposed amendment 4.1 proposed by Hector MacLeod. All those in favour of the amendment, can you raise your cards? I might have to count. All those against? Right, we're going to have to... It's a card count. Excellent. Right, we're going to ask all those in favour. You can keep your cards raised, please. All those in favour of the amendment. Who do we have to count, Corey? Just yourself and Joe, maybe? So, who else do we have? Can we have another person? It's all about the roads. So this is the amendment which is extending the dualling of the A9, A96 to add an A82 and A87. You like that one? Okay. The ladies in the front say yes. Just keep your cards raised. Thank you. Have you got that? Yep, got that. Thank you very much indeed. All those against proposed amendment 4.1, keep your cards raised. Have you counted everybody? Can I ask them to put their hands down? Yep, please relax. I'll give you that result before we move to the second one. You may want to stay on the floor, Corey, actually. We'll see. Okay, so those who voted in favour of the amendment were 32, those who voted against were 34, so the amendment falls. That's 4.1. Next, 4.2. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your cards. All those against, as expected. Okay, that means 4.2 falls. So now we are simply voting on the resolution as it stands, unamended. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your cards. Any against? Just one at the front. Almost unanimously. Well done, Ian, Cameron and team. And with that, thank you very much indeed. That was an excellent debate. Excellent. We now turn to lunch. We have a break for an hour and a half. I'm not sure if Marjorie's here yet to conduct the ALBA session on branding, but fear not, lunch is available, and then those candidates wishing to stand for election can go to the room just outside there to get some more information on that. I'll see you back here at 2:30 sharp. Thank you. Good afternoon. We are going to start in a few short moments with the topical motions. I'm going to take the opportunity, given I can't see the proposer of either of the topical motions in the room, to see what the topical motions are which have been chosen. One is on Sandy Peggy, and one is on liberation. So, if I can trouble AV to put them both up one at a time. You might not be able to see it actually. Oh. Do you want me to laboriously read it to you? I mean, I don't mind reading out to you. Shall I read it out? So, yeah, is that the will of the room? Okay. So while we're waiting for Neil Hanvey, who's proposing this to grace us with his presence, this motion is in the name of Neil Hanvey, Motion is entitled Nurse Sandy Peggy and the Restoration of Equality to Scotland's Public Services. Actually, I'm going to read it from my phone. Conference notes that the case of Kirkcaldy nurse Sandy Peggy has ignited significant debate over the balance of rights and the protection of single-sex spaces, both within Scotland and internationally. In December 2023, nurse Sandy Peggy objected to sharing the women's changing room at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy with a trans-identifying male colleague, leading to mutual allegations of harassment and discrimination, ultimately culminating in an ongoing employment tribunal. Conference further notes and affirms ALBA Party policy positions on equality, including the rights and protections of women, New Scots, young Scots, those with disabilities, faith communities and all other characteristics as protected by the Equality Act 2010. In line with this commitment to the rights and protections of women, Sandy Peggy was able to access the support of her then local ALBA Party MP Neil Hanvey, paving the way for her to access expert support from both For Women Scotland and human rights organisation Sex Matters. While the Scottish Government has reaffirmed its support for single-sex spaces and the Equality and Human Rights Commission has engaged with NHS Fife regarding their obligations under the Equality Act 2010, the matter remains unresolved. The Tribunal's outcome will set a significant precedence for workplace policies concerning the balance of rights in single-sex facilities in Scotland. Conference therefore resolves to call on the Scottish Government to instruct a review of organisational employment policies, ensuring employment practices are consistent with existing equality and human rights legislation. We further call on the Scottish and UK governments to clarify that the protected characteristics of sex in the Equality Act 2010 refers to natal sex and cannot be modified for the purposes of single-sex exemptions. The ALBA Party wish For Women Scotland well in their pivotal UK Supreme Court case concerning the legal definition of women under the Equality Act 2010, and Conference instructs the ALBA Party Equality Convener to lead the development of party policy on the restoration of equality to Scotland's public services for the 2026 Holyrood elections. So that's the motion. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask for some hush in the front row, ladies. Yes, I've noticed you talking throughout the first. As people behind can't hear, yes, I know, terrible, and I've given you lunch and everything. Wished. Right, to propose the motion, and I'm going to ask, do you have a formal second? I'll ask for one from the floor. Can I have a second? Thank you very much, Elaine Mitchell. To propose this excellent motion, the most excellent Deputy Leader, Neil Hanvey.
Thanks, Tasmina. Thanks, Conference. This is a really personal motion for me for a whole variety of different reasons, but most importantly, because in February of last year, a woman came to see me in my constituency office with a story about how she had been suspended from work because she had objected to sharing her changing facilities with a trans-identifying male. She told me about the hostility that had been visited on her by her employers, about the lack of regard for single-sex spaces in the workplace, and about a professional class in the unions who had turned their back on female nursing staff across the country. I was absolutely horrified, not just because the story touched me on a human level, but because that's my previous profession. I understand the workforce in nursing, and I was absolutely appalled that anyone would place one of their colleagues in such a compromising position. And then fast forward a few months, and of course the story breaks the news, not just in Scotland, not just in the UK, but across the world, because it's such an extraordinary situation. It really, because it's unresolved, we don't know quite where this is going to go. But if you remember the testimony in the tribunal, where Sandy had to recount such intimate, personal and distressing circumstances, not just to a tribunal, but to the world, in defence of our sex-based rights for single-sex spaces. It was absolutely disgraceful that that has been allowed to happen in Scotland. And so, whilst the Scottish Government have said that they have affirmed their support of single-sex spaces, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission has engaged with NHS Fife, there are two things that are problematic there. First, we know that the Scottish Government, when they say single-sex spaces, they include trans-identifying males as females in that definition. So that's not any help whatsoever. And so that underscores the importance and the reason why the For Women Scotland's pivotal UK Supreme Court case is incorporated in this resolution. And to date, the AHRC engagement with NHS Fife has had no response whatsoever. And if you've been following the case, you will be aware of the absolutely superb legal team that Sandy has. Naomi Cunningham, KC, and Margaret Gribben, who is her solicitor. And I have to say, they are absolutely exemplary. And I'm still in touch with them as the case progresses. But let me be clear, these policies are self-ID by stealth. Self-ID is not the law in Scotland, but these policies are in place across public services, and they are unlawful. The Scottish Government and many boards may be willing to flout the law, but they do not have the option to ignore the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992, which states the following, that changing facilities will not be suitable unless they include separate facilities for or separate use of facilities by men and women where necessary for reasons of propriety. Now, we have, as a party, been at the forefront of this battle, and it's imperative that we have a robust policy going into the election in 2026. The situation with single-sex spaces is but one small part of a much bigger agenda where ideological policy has been inflicted on public services, and we need to demonstrate to the public that we are on their side, that we have a clear policy on sex-based rights, the balancing of rights, and particularly protecting and safeguarding vulnerable people and children. Okay, I hope you'll support the resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. I have a... Joe, is that for this debate? No, it's not. Sorry, I'm just being advised. David Maitland, were you going to speak to this? Are you here? No. I just want to give the opportunity, because it's topical. If anyone else would like to speak in favour of the motion, I'm happy to take any cards now. I know some people who I would think would like to speak in favour of this motion. Otherwise, we shall move on. I know there's some women who've been campaigning strong and hard for this and deserve recognition for it. Okay, that's fine. Can I ask, so I thought somebody was putting a hand up. Can I ask, therefore, if this topical motion is passed by acclaim? Now, the next motion we have is on the Liberation Scotland petition to the United Nations. Again, I think that's slightly bigger text. Proposed by Christina Hendry and seconded by Alba Youth. I'll just read it. Conference welcomes the progress made by Liberation Scotland in their attempts to present a petition to the UN Special Committee on Decolonisation. Conference reaffirms our intention to work with all parties and groups and support all initiatives designed to advance the cause of independence. Before I call Christina, I'll advise that the Conference Committee did receive a motion entitled Topical in the name of ALBA International LACU and Dave Llewellyn on this topic. It was an exceptionally long motion. It's been truncated, and I would like to invite any speakers from ALBA International LACU and Dave Llewellyn to speak to this motion, because that would be totally in order. Thank you very much indeed. Christina.
Conference. This topical motion encompasses exactly what ALBA stands for: independence. It is in line with everything the party has done to advance the cause of Scottish independence. We've put out olive branches to other independent supporting parties in 2021 and 2024. We've held national assemblies and other events open to all independent supporters, not just ALBA members. We've invited other independence leaders to speak at conferences, such as Colette Walker from ISP and Sarah Salyers from Salvo. ALBA recognise that independence is not something we can do or should do alone. As Angus said today in the motion on independence, the evidence of the last decade shows that the SNP cannot achieve independence on their own. The SNP need ALBA in the next Parliament, just as ALBA needs the support across the independence movement. Members, this conference is a difficult one for many of us. It is ALBA's first conference without Alex Salmond, and this is the first conference I've ever attended without Uncle Alec. And not seeing him sat at that table just feels like something's missing. And many of you have already said to me today, it just doesn't quite feel the same. But as he would always remind us, the golden strand of Scottish sovereignty since before the declaration of Arbroath, as well as democratic action, we must support all civil action for our nation's sovereignty. But conference, in the future, we have first that we can look forward to. We can look forward to our first ALBA MSPs elected at the Scottish Parliament next year. And as this motion sets out, by working with all parties and groups, I know that in the near future, each of us will be able to say, for the first time, we live in the independent nation of Scotland. Thank you.
Well done, Tina. Are there any speakers from ALBA International LACU? Yes. Maggie Chetty, welcome.
Comrades, I'd like to welcome the fact that this motion has been accepted. It's got a very welcome place here at this conference, and I know that from talking to people that there's enormous support for the spirit and content of the emergency motion. Really, I would like to reiterate the ways that liberation movements succeed. I've been part of a successful liberation movement in the anti-apartheid struggle that managed to throw off the appalling obstacles that black people had in South Africa. And the way it was achieved was by unity. Unity is something that's very, very easy to say, but in fact, it's a very precious thing. As an old Stalinist, I'll quote something that Stalin said, which was, "Guard your unity like the apple of your eye." And it is absolutely true. I think it's important not for us just to be formal about this. I think it's very, very important for us to become known as ALBA, the party that is for the unity of the independence movement. And we have to look for practical ways to demonstrate that. We must be seen to reach out, and not just reach out with generosity, reach out with a very positive spirit. We have to be doing that. I would like to suggest, because when we reach out, as Christina's suggesting, you're reaching out to all sorts of people that are maybe not in parties and so on. You're bringing them into the struggle and you're supporting that struggle. I would like to suggest that we look at very soon doing some kind of National Assembly Day or Unity Day, or Hands Across the Independence Movement Day, where we actually do what we did in Perth, when we bring in people of all parties, of all movements, of everybody that's a different thread of the great independence movement tartan. So let's go for it, let's do it, let's look at ways to promote and bolster the movement that's taking us forward to independence.
Thank you, Maggie. No one else has indicated they want to speak, so can I ask if this motion is passed by claim? We now move to the next agenda item, which is Council of Nations and Regions. And to introduce the motion, can I please call ALBA, from ALBA East Lothian Lacu, Morgan Davies. Morgan, is there a seconder here that's going to speak to it? Yeah. Can I have a seconder from the floor, please, for this motion? Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you.
I do want to sum up.
You want to sum up?
Yes.
So just give me a second to confirm. You wish to make a speech and then sum up on your own speech?
Well, if nobody else is speaking, yes.
Are you just looking for extended period of time to speak?
No, not necessarily, because I think it's less than 5 minutes. I mean, if you want me to do it all in one go, I'll do it all in one go.
I can't ask you to sum up on a debate if there hasn't been a debate. So you're inviting a card to oppose.
Okay. No.
Give me a second. Let's just check. I love debate. Is there anyone against? I doubt it though. Anyone against this motion? No. So I'll tell you what, Morgan. No, don't sit down. Take a little bit of extra time you need. How about that? Okay. Take the time you need.
Good afternoon, conference delegates. I stand before you today to address a matter of profound importance. The constitutional reform proposed by Gordon Brown in 2022, which was incorporated into the Labour Party's manifesto for the Westminster 24 election and brought into effect by the new Labour government. At the heart of these reforms is the creation of the Council of the Nations and Regions, a body that includes the Prime Minister, the heads of the 3 devolved administrations, the Mayor of London and the elected metro mayors of combined authorities in England. Whilst this initiative is substantially designed to foster greater cooperation and unity among the various regions of the United States Kingdom, it has raised significant concerns, particularly here in Scotland. The first meeting of this council took place in Edinburgh on the 12th of October with the Prime Minister of the UK, the 12 mayors from England, and the First Ministers of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, as well as the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland. However, we must address the underlying implications of this Council and the potential consequences for Scotland's status as an ancient and sovereign nation. Many view this move as an attempt by the Government of Westminster to undermine Scotland's historic claim to nationhood and to diminish our status to that of an English combined authority. This is not just a technical adjustment, it is a fundamental challenge to the dignity and autonomy of our nation. The creation of the Council of the Nations and Regions appears to be a strategic manoeuvre to bypass the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament, effectively equating the First Minister of Scotland to the level of an English mayor. This is a gross misrepresentation of Scotland's unique historical and political status. It is an affront to the centuries-old legacy of Scotland as a distinct and sovereign entity, one that has always fought fiercely for its independence and self-determination. Equally troubling is the response of the current Scottish Government and First Minister, who have enthusiastically embraced this arrangement. This acquisition can be perceived as a slight and an insult to the Scottish nation, the Scottish people and the Scottish Parliament. It raises questions about the Scottish Government's commitment to upholding the sovereignty and dignity of Scotland. As our late leader, Alex Salmond, poignantly remarked in his last post on X, it is designed to diminish the status of our Parliament and the First Minister. Part of becoming independent is about thinking independently, not subserviently. John should have politely declined the meeting with the words Scotland is a country, not a county. These words resonate deeply with all of us who hold Scotland's sovereignty dear. The essence of our national identity is rooted in our history, our culture, and in our unwavering desire to govern ourselves. We must remain vigilant against any attempts to erode this identity or to reduce our nation to a mere administrative region.
The path forward requires a resolute stance from all Scots who believe in the sanctity of our nationhood. It is imperative that we assert our right to self-determination and reject any measures that seek to undermine our sovereignty. We must demand that our leaders prioritise the interests of Scotland above all else and refuse to participate in frameworks that compromise our autonomy. Let us remember that the strength of Scotland lies in its people, its institution and its enduring spirit of independence. We have a duty to honour the legacy of those who came before us and to ensure that future generations inherit a Scotland that is proud, sovereign and free. In conclusion, I urge all Scots to stand united in defence of our nation's sovereignty. Let us send a clear message to Westminster and to the world that Scotland is not a mere region or county, but a country with a rich history, a vibrant culture and an unyielding commitment to its independence. Together, we can uphold the dignity and autonomy of our beloved Scotland. Therefore, I urge you to pass this resolution. And what I was going to say in summing up was when you run out of your own words, it is time to start quoting great leaders, both who unfortunately did not live to see their countries regain their independence. First, Alex Salmond. Scotland is a country, not a county. And in the words of Charles Stuart Parnell, no man has a right to fix the boundary of the march of a nation. No man has a right to say to his country, thus far shalt thou go and no further. And I direct that to Gordon Brown and everyone else who wishes to keep Scotland in a box.
I have no cards in against, no further cards to speak. So can I ask if the motion is passed by acclaim? We now move to the next motion, which is challenging the narrative on social security, to be proposed by the excellent Amy Madden. And I don't know if you have a seconder from Falkirk Glacu, otherwise I'm going to ask Kath Ferguson, who's going to speak for the motion, if she will agree to being the formal seconder. First of all, Amy Madden. Welcome, Amy.
We might also have Alison for seconding, so that's good. We've got a few. Good. Okay, so when we were first looking at this motion, we were thinking, between myself and Suzanne Blackley, about the language we use when talking about benefits. So we were starting to pick up on a real narrative around skivers and strivers in the media and from politicians. There was a lot of implications that people claiming benefits were somehow frauds or exaggerating. It comes through quite a lot on mental health. We're seeing it this week, for example, with the anxiety topic coming up in Parliament, but it's everywhere. I wasn't expecting that by the time this motion came up, it would be so topical. I didn't think we'd have a Labour Chancellor trying to balance the budget by going after the poorest and the most vulnerable in society, and particularly not by going after PIP, which has got about the lowest fraud rate there is for a benefit. Because it's so hard to get, you've got to be quite ill to get that in the first place. So the motion itself is looking at the language on this question. So I'm asking Conference to note, with regret, the negative portrayal that's happening at the moment of benefits claimants as somehow lazy, scrounging or fraudulent, and the harm that that demonisation has on mental and physical well-being of people who are currently claiming benefits. It's increasing exclusion from society, and it pushes you further away from recovery and further away from being an active citizen. I'm asking Conference to assert that social security is a hallmark of a decent society, and it's a basic human right. It's a vital thing to ensure that everyone, all of us, have dignity and access to basic needs during times when you might have ill health, you might be caring for children or adults, or you might have other financial hardship. I ask Conference to recognise that the vast majority of people on benefits are in genuine need, and that any one of us could be in that position. All it takes is one accident, one unfortunate event, you're in that place too. We also have to look at things like waiting lists for NHS treatment, because if you are long-term sick and you want to get back to work, we have to get you the treatment to make sure that you can actually get back into the workforce in good time. The longer you wait on a waiting list, the longer you're out of work. I ask Conference to challenge the narrative in the media and also from rival parties who are making quite a lot of bad language on this. I ask you to promote, when you're talking in public, talking about ALBA, also promote a fairer, a balanced and a more accurate view of social security and benefits. It's a necessary safety net. It has to be there, and real life is complicated. I also ask for ALBA to develop and strengthen our policies around related areas like NHS waiting lists, employability services and carer support. If we make sure that we have the right support for people that need it, it's going to be there for them when they fall in that safety net. So the most vulnerable people in society need our support. It's hard enough if you are ill, if you have to be a carer, if you fall into difficulty. That extra challenge about the language and being told you're somehow a fraud, you're lazy, you don't deserve it, that's a further burden. It doesn't have to be there. We in ALBA can push back against this. We can promote a fairer Scotland. You don't get to a better society by attacking the weakest. Please vote the motion.
Amy, did you say Alison was going to speak or formally second from the floor? Formally seconding from the floor, yeah? Thank you, Alison. And thank you, Alison. And I now call Kath Ferguson to speak in favour of the motion. Kath.
I'm a first-time speaker, so if you could be nice, that would be good.
Be nice to Kath.
I'm also much more confident in writing than speaking, so I'm not used to this. And I wasn't. Am I seconding this now?
You are. No, we have a formal seconder. So
that's fine.
You're just speaking in favour of the motion. Thank you. Take all the time you need.
First of all, I want to say that the reason I first came into supporting independence was because at the time I was working in health and benefits, and it struck me as bizarre and crazy that these two things are not only not joined up, but not even run by the same governments in Scotland. And to me, health and welfare are part of the same system. And working in the Citizens Advice Bureau at the time, some of the cases I saw around 2010, which was the last benefit reform, were horrific, truly horrific. And these are people who are sometimes at the very worst, most stressful, awful time in their lives. And they're being made to feel awful. What I actually wanted to add here was something that I don't hear spoken about very often in terms of what the Labour government are doing now, which is the connection between welfare, particularly health welfare, and the pension and retirement age. When I started work, women retired at 60 and men at 65. That is now up to 68. We have people in the most physically demanding jobs very often start work at 16. And these are jobs like maybe carers, porters, builders, cleaners, the kind of jobs where your body actually does get quite worn out. You can't physically do those jobs until you're 68. Plus, people who started work at 16, by the time they're 56, they've paid 40 years of national insurance. Once they get to a point where they're maybe too sick to work and they can't do it any longer, they now enter this system, which they've paid for, which is just a punishment. It's no longer there to help them. It just acts as a kind of Kafkaesque system, which is designed to denigrate and to punish. And I just think it's appalling. And the kind of language that we're getting, it's been demonising people for years and years now. But the people they're demonising, apart from, it is the sick and disabled, but it's also people who've worked for 40 years. And this idea that people are scroungers is just something I find absolutely disgusting. So I would absolutely say support this motion, and we all need to be challenging that narrative everywhere it's found, because it's becoming just far too widespread.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'd now like to call Louise Hobb to speak in favour of the motion, and then Kay McCall for the remit back, and I'll look for a formal seconder to that so it can be heard. Louise? Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, conference. I wasn't planning to be speaking at all today. Couldn't resist, because I think something that came up there, just really a couple of the points that came up in this motion, that it's quite easy for us to sit and not really notice. One is the comment about how we're only one accident away from landing on benefits. And I think I'm an example of that. And it wasn't even an accident. It was nothing you could have seen coming. I was 20 years into a decent career, 25 grand, a year, I'd bought my house and I was paying off the mortgage and I was getting promoted, I was getting headhunted, it was great. And what happened? I got the flu became ME, and I haven't worked for 8 years since. After the first year, I couldn't do voluntary work. It's got worse. And I find myself, thankfully I had that mortgage, thankfully another relative died and I was able to not lose my house. But literally, that's how easy it can happen. You get the flu one day and a month later, that's you the rest of your life. You know, you're in that situation. I think just to illustrate how easily that could happen to people who are, who think, oh, that'll be somebody else that'll happen to. And the other point is that because the debate on this has all been around PIP, because it's, as usual, the London-centric narrative, that benefit is one of the benefits that was actually taken over by Social Security Scotland and replaced with the adult disability payment, where the payment, the amount of money you get is identical because that's decided at London, but because it was devolved to Social Security Scotland, they set up to manage it in what, to be fair on the government, who sometimes like to knock the SNP, but one of their better efforts, set up with dignity and fairness intended, not perfect, to be at the heart of it. And I've noticed the difference between trying to apply under the PIP system, which I looked at the form and there was no point even applying. And when I did volunteer work, you saw people, and as soon as they came for their PIP renewal, they got the letter through for their PIP renewal, you knew they would be ill for the next 6 months. They would be more ill for the next 6 months until that process had gone through because of the punishment they were taking over how difficult it was and having to appeal and so on. Whereas applying under the adult disability payment, I don't know yet if I will get it. I'm still in the process of applying, but the form, instead of being a tick box of how little can we give you, how hard can we make it, we're trying to cut our costs and not give you any money, is clearly designed to try and capture your whole situation. What judgment they make on that, I don't know, but is clearly designed to see the human being and their whole situation so that you feel you can be honest. You can be honest and just say, you're just asking, here's what my situation is. Whereas this whole narrative is almost pushing people into being dishonest because the PIP system is set up to, say, you can walk 20 metres, you can do this. And so people obviously say they can only walk 19 metres because otherwise they're not going to get any money. So I think that's just the 2 points I'd want to make. And obviously if the PIP funding is cut, barring it consequentials, we're going to have problems in Scotland. Even the people who might think, well, I'm not on that, we're going to have major problems if that PIP money is cut. So just to make those two points. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you. I'd like to invite Kay McCall for the remit back, and I would require a seconder from the floor so it can be heard, just to facilitate. Thank you very much indeed. Kay.
Hi there. So, sorry that this is my first time speaking at conference for a remit back. No clap, right, okay.
Oh, come on. First time speaker, quite well.
Yeah, so let's see, just a wee bit in my history. Worked for a bank for 15 years. On my way to work at 5:30 in the morning, my wee sports car, black ice, smashed into a tree. 5 operations and unable to work. So it took me a year and a half to get back to work and I had to claim PIP. And after having PIP for 6 months, I was sent for an ATOS. to Glasgow, where they put the lift closed. At that stage, I still had 2 broken ankles because they had to keep resetting them. And I had to get up the stairs as the lift was out of order. And my PIP was declined because I no longer required it because I could get up the stairs for first flight. Since then, moved on to Police Scotland and civil service, currently working for Social Security Scotland. And I deal with legal sides and adult disability. Our first rule is dignity, fairness and respect. Every single client in Scotland is dealt with dignity, fairness and respect. I don't know if anybody's ever came across being in school or dealing with people who have dyslexia or just what would have been classed back in the day as being remedial. So they make paperwork that anybody can understand. They show the form on one side of the form and it gives you more or less the answers you put into the next side of the form. If you are struggling with that, we will send somebody out to help you fill it in. And they're not there to judge you, they're there to help you fill it in. They're not like where previous would have been measuring as what's that person like, are they acting slow, are they just being like this? There's no judgment whatsoever, they're completely there to support you. So my remit back is just a wee bit considering, yeah, London-centric and Labour language is shirkers, and that was Tory language as well. I hate to stick up for the Scottish Government, but the Scottish Government's process on adult disability at Social Security Scotland is completely for the client, and it is completely to put them first and make sure that they feel respected and are treated as human beings. And I do expect that further down the line it will have an effect on the Barnett consequentials, but it's my understanding from what's been said so far it could be more so musculoskeletal as a process rather than people with mental health or other issues that you can't always just see. And I do expect at some point it will be cut because we're going to get cut, right? But I honestly would like to see at this stage people in Scotland are treated with dignity, fairness and respect, and I think that lady just pointed that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Amy, you have the opportunity to sum up and address comments made if you wish. Where are you, Amy? Right, okay, just wait for it. No problem. So we'll move straight to the vote. We're going to vote first of all on the remit back. I should just advise conference, if you're looking at the motion in front of you, this does refer to a Westminster narrative. So just worthy of note. So all of those in favour of the remit back, please raise their cards. All those against? Remit back fails. All those in favour of the motion, please raise their cards. All those against? Or any against? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. You're getting tired. I can sense it. I can sense it. I need you to get your cards. We've got a Grangemouth motion coming up now. And there's the conference, Kayleigh. I'm just interested in how many of you got any energy left. Right. Next motion is Grangemouth workers deserve better. Before we move to hearing the substantive motion itself, we'd like to play a film speech that we've been given by Grangemouth shop steward called Chris Hamilton. This is not for social media, this is for the privacy of this conference, but Chris has recorded some remarks for us as a Grangemouth shop steward. So let's hear from Chris Hamilton.
Hello conference, thank you very much for the invitation to make this address, and apologies that I cannot be there in person. My name is Chris Hamilton and I'm one of the workers and shop stewards at the Grangemouth refinery, where of course, as many of you will know, on the 21st of November 2023, Petroneos, the business which now owns the site, announced it began preparatory work to transition the refinery from its current capacity as an oil refinery into an import terminal. Conference, this of course in effect means the end of refining at Grangemouth, because the products which are made there today will simply go on to be imported from elsewhere. The UK will go from having 6 refineries down to 5, and of course in Scotland we will go from having 1 refinery at Grangemouth down to none. And this is whilst at a time before any refinery closes, where fuel imports in this country appear to be at an all-time high, and of course an ever volatile world. Today, the refinery at Grangemouth employs 500 people directly, but with hundreds into thousands more also relying on the site's existence. For example, contractors, supply chain and jobs in the wider community. In fact, an independent economic impact assessment, which was carried out by PwC, showed in their estimates approximately 3,000 jobs relying on the site's existence. And just to be clear, that is purely for the refinery, which today makes up 1/3 of the Grangemouth industrial complex. But Conference, we know ultimately that the impact this potential closure could have won't just be big to Grangemouth or to the Forth Valley region, but to Scotland as a nation. Because according to some reports, the site today makes up 4% of Scotland's GDP and up to 8% of Scotland's manufacturing base. And it's ultimately for these reasons why Unite Union launched its Keep Grangemouth Working campaign, with the main objective of the campaign to raise public awareness of the situation at Grangemouth and, of course, to in turn apply pressure to all decision makers. Our campaign, which of course many of you have supported, has been active over the last year, and we've had a number of high-profile events and initiatives. These have ranged from anything between marches at Grangemouth and Edinburgh to street stalls, leafleting and e-actions where nearly 10,000 emails were sent to MSPs through an electronic system. We've visited Parliament and we've also met with dozens of high-profile politicians. Our representatives are featured in countless media outlets including TV, radio and newspapers. And of course, recognising the importance of social media and its role it plays today in society, the Keep Grangemouth Working campaign has its own social media pages, and I'm pleased to say, for example, on Facebook alone, has views into the millions. And of course, in addition to our campaign's own events, we have appeared wherever possible, for example, speaking at conferences like I am today, to raise the awareness of the situation at Grangemouth, and of course that work continues. Our campaign today has deliberately focused on the community. There are of course other arguments which continue to be had around Grangemouth, for example energy security, just transition and economics, and some of which I will touch on. But looking back in time, we have plenty of other examples of what happens when these workplaces leave areas and communities. Coal mining is just one example, or the steelworks at Ravenscraig as another. In that sense, through this campaign, we continue to emphasise it's more than just a workplace that is at risk here. But has the campaign today had any effect? Well, there can be no doubt that the activity of this campaign, of which many of you have supported, has been impactful. We have changed the political compass so that inaction on Grangemouth can no longer be an option, and we have rightfully put Grangemouth centre stage of this country's politics. And on the subject of politics, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Kenny McCaskill for his recent election success. Kenny, of course, as many of you will know, has been one of our champions in our campaign, and before the 2024 general election was in effect the sole voice on Grangemouth in Westminster, something which I personally am entirely grateful of. So what is it that our campaign is calling for? Well, our key demands of the campaign from the start has been extend, invest and transition. It's about bringing new opportunities and technologies of the future to the site at a time where the current processes can come to an end. Critically, it obviously has to be the start of something new before it is the end of the current. And as I've said dozens of times before, it's not either or. It's not oil and gas or the low green future technologies, because at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to have to be both. Ironically, as we can see in other countries, it's the oil and gas workers today who are going to be the low carbon green energy workers of tomorrow. And that's why these workers and these jobs need protecting. It's ultimately what we believe should be the example of the so-called just transition. And of course, Conference, while we're on the subject of the wider energy transition, we all have a role to play, because of course Grangemouth is only the tip of the iceberg. In Scotland alone, it's estimated that up to 100,000 people are reliant on oil and gas, and therefore it's important that our politicians going forward recognise the critical role that this sector has and should continue to play in the future. And therefore it demonstrates what I've said a number of times now. The situation at Grangemouth, if done correctly, could be a great example of the opportunity of the energy transition. Or if it progresses as it currently appears to be, it'll be a great example of the unjust transition. Conference, it's my workplace and community today, but it may well be yours tomorrow. This campaign is ultimately about putting the interests of working people before any other interests. It's about defending what's left of a manufacturing sector which for decades in this country has been in terminal decline. It's also about highlighting the current failure of the first big test of the so-called just transition, and it's also about highlighting the inadequate industrial policy of not just our government, but unfortunately of both governments. The journey which we continue would not have been possible without the strong support from across the trade union movement and the general public behind us. So on behalf of the workers at Grangemouth, I want to say thanks to all members of ALBA for the ongoing support for our campaign, and hopefully together we can keep Grangemouth working. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to Chris Hamilton. And now to move the motion on Grangemouth workers deserve better, I'm delighted to call Josh Robertson, and it will be seconded by Donald Hurley. Josh.
Kind of baffling, Conference, that we even have to stand here and have this motion. And I think I'm not going to say any more than Craig did. I'm not going to speak for long. I wasn't the original proposer, but sadly he can't make it today. And better people than me, like our leader Kenny, have fought this issue since day one. Our party does have a proud track record on defending Grangemouth, and this is a motion as a continuation of that work. But what I will use is this is an opportunity to give a warning on the Will report and the commitment from Westminster to protect workers and combine with private enterprise to support workers. So let's have a look at Labour's current track record on delivering change. What's were promised and what have we actually been delivered? The promise to support WASPy women. I don't have to tell the women in here who are part of 3.6 million whose claims are about to be rejected. The promise to cut energy bills. The reality. They cut the winter fuel payment and allow energy prices to rise again. The promise to protect the poorest in our society. What's really happening? They're cutting PIP and removing benefits to those that are the most vulnerable. So do we trust Sir Keir and Ed on delivering for Scottish infrastructure? Not a chance, Conference. The current proposals and promises are hollow without direct action. But as a bit of personal experience, I live 10 minutes away from Ravenscraig. Daily I see the barren brownfield sites that were used to employ thousands of people. I see the deprivation, the lack of investment, the struggling public services, declining utilities. We know what happens when these industries are removed. We know the lies, the promises of retaining the private sector investments. We know the lies about the promises for retraining. We know about the lies for the promises of community support. What did we get in Ravenscraig? We didn't get jobs, we got a sports centre. We didn't get the infrastructure, we got housing estates. And although these are welcome investments, they don't feed or house 10,000 people. As a community that has been through this, and as speaking as a future generation from decades since it happened, we cannot allow this to happen to another area of Scotland. Certainly not without a fight. So please, Conference, continue our good work on this, and please support the motion. Thank you.
To second the motion, please can I invite Donald Hurley. Welcome, Donald.
Thank you. Conference, if I were to say to you, Westminster does not care about Scotland, you'd probably agree with me. But I'm not going to say that, because I think it's much worse. I think that Westminster is actually hostile to Scotland, and I think there's plenty of evidence of that. Let's look at some of the evidence. Remember Great British Energy? That was supposed to be something big in Aberdeen, wasn't it? I don't think its chief executive ever will need to step inside Scotland. We know that there has been UK taxpayers' money going to fund a refinery in Antwerp at a time when we know that Grangemouth is slated to be closed. That's an absolute disgrace. What else can we say about Westminster? Permitting the exploitation of Scottish energy and other resources to the enrichment of private capital south of the border, while many Scottish people live in fuel poverty. That's a disgrace. We have willful destruction of Scottish energy security, because if we don't have a refinery, we will pay extra when we're already in fuel poverty. And also, any chance of a just transition will be gone if we lose our refinery. In the general election campaign, our new leader stood squarely with the workers in Grangemouth and campaigned with them. And we have established links with Grangemouth, for which we've been thanked today. Wasn't expecting that wonderful presentation there. We can continue to build on that. We have the support there. It is something that we are known to stand for. The depth and breadth of Kenny's knowledge on this has been praised by the people of Grangemouth, and I'm actually from Clackmannshire, Lacu. The Westminster constituency is Alloa and Grangemouth, so we were sort of campaigning together on that. Kenny understands the industry and its challenges. Unfortunately, in the election, the electorate prioritised, and I cannot blame them, they prioritised delivering a round and well-merited kicking to the incumbent, a certain John Nicholson. I would have derived a certain pleasure from that, but unfortunately it did mean that in doing that, they went in the direction, they reverted to sort of past approaches, and they did elect a Labour person. John Nicholson, of course, from the party that has prioritised gender identity politics over, well, pretty well everything else. So therefore, on this issue, it really remains up to ALBA, uniquely, as the only party which is seriously fighting for the Grangemouth workers. And it remains up to us to embrace this motion and to affirm it as central to our policies, which it will continue to be, I have no doubt. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I want to be fair. I want to say about the Labour person, Brian Leishman, who did win, he has actually stood up for the Grangemouth complex in Westminster, but he's only one individual in the Labour Party, and the rest of the party, they've ignored him. They've hung him out to dry, effectively, with that dismissive attitude with which they regard everything Scottish. This motion is central to our values and our identity. ALBA stands for Scotland. ALBA stands with Grangemouth. Please support this motion.
Thank you very much, Donald. There are no cards in against, so can I ask that this motion be passed by acclaim? Now, we have sped through this afternoon agenda, as quickly as we've ever done it, I think. I could have taken another motion, emergency motion, but I've promised that it will be taken tomorrow, and so it shall be instead. So we move to the highlight of today, our first day of conference, which is our brand new Deputy Leader's address. And to introduce that address and our Deputy Leader, please welcome our party leader, Kenny McCaskill.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Neil to you. Neil and I hadn't met until we were both elected back in December 2019. Neil was elected as an independent. He had had the whip taken away from him and the recognition from the SNP. That had been done to him because of the heinous crime of speaking out against Israel. The genocide that has unfolded has shown that Neil was not just prescient but a man of principle, and it was shameful that he should have been so shaddily treated by a party that he had served so well as a councillor and then as a candidate. But notwithstanding that, showing the respect that he had within his constituency, he was returned. And that was shown in how he continued to conduct himself in Westminster. He and I were part of that SNP group initially that were led to believe that there would be an independence convention, that were led to believe that there would be change. But it wasn't to come. Neil and I left together to join with Alex Salmond, Neil always having stood at Alex's shoulder, the same as each and every one of us here. And in Westminster, as part of that twosome of the ALBA group, he was a stalwart, standing up for the rights of women and children, speaking out against the actions both of a UK government and of a Scottish government, but most importantly, putting forward the cause of independence. He was pivotal in what was achieved between him, Alec and Tasmina in terms of Professor McCorkadale's judgment, in terms of raising that issue there, getting it on the agenda. He is a man of undoubted principle and dignity. I phoned him on the day that Alec had died to tell him the sad news. He was on holiday with his family. Despite that, he rallied to the cause. He, along with Tasmina, Corrie and other members of staff, has been fundamental in allowing us to keep this party going. It has had its challenges, but he is a man who has been prepared to speak out. And those of us who watched it, some of us saw it live, although I could only hear it since I had been ejected first, and how he was prepared to stand up against the pontificating and pomposity of Lindsay Hoyle, knows that Neil Hanvey is a man of principle.
A man of principle who can't open a bottle of water. Conference, thank you very much for that lovely reception. Thank you, Kenny, for your very kind, generous words. It really is an absolute honour to stand here and address the party as your deputy leader, and I hope I'm able to deliver on your expectations in that role. As you would expect, I'm delighted with the result, and I relish the challenge ahead as we push towards the 2026 elections for the Scottish Parliament. Once again, I would like to extend my thanks to every ALBA Party member who participated in the election. Your involvement is absolutely essential to our party democracy. And I would also like to give my commiserations to my opponent, Chris McElhenney, and to our Holyrood leader, Ash Regan, MSP, and congratulate them on their participation in this very important election. There's a few more to go. I'd also like to thank, as we did earlier today, Mike Mackenzie. He has conducted himself with care and distinction, and we can be very confident that the election was guided appropriately. As I said during the election campaign, this was not an election that any of us wanted. It's impossible, absolutely impossible, to replace Alec, and continuing his legacy with passion and determination is an enormous responsibility. So it's an honour to follow in those footsteps and to play my part, not only in keeping his dream alive, but to ensure his lifetime's dedication to Scotland and its cause is delivered. I just want to talk a little bit now about leadership and my motivation for standing in this election. I didn't enter politics with an eye for a career. As many of you know, I've already carved out a successful career in the NHS, and I've achieved much in my professional and personal life that satiates that sense of personal ambition. What motivates me now is beyond me. It's beyond all of us, and that is the future of our people and our country. That's why I became an activist. That's why I spent years as an organiser in Fife, building campaign capacity. It's why I worked full-time as a councillor and with a dedicated crew of friends, I led my local Yes campaign. Independence for Scotland is the glory we seek, not for ourselves, but for everyone. It is our founding and guiding principle. We are the guardians of independence. The ALBA Party are the party of Scottish independence. And how we carry ourselves forward must be done with the utmost integrity. Having the courage to do the right thing is essential if we are to win the public's trust. I can assure you, I won't turn a blind eye to unacceptable behaviour and will always strive to do the right thing. Because doing the right thing really matters in politics. In 2019, as Kenny referenced, in 2019, I spoke out against the dangers to women and children from self-ID. And while the consequences of doing so were very personally challenging, it was the first time the independence movement pushed back against Nicola Sturgeon's diktat and amplified the growing opposition to her gender recognition reform. Had I not done so, had Kenny and I not joined Alex ALBA Party, had we not collectively had the courage to defend women's rights and protections, had we not made that case again and again in Westminster, Holyrood and in the media, Sandy Peggy would have had no other Fife MP to turn to. She would not have had the support of Sex Matters or the expert legal team. There would be no international recognition of the importance and significance of her case. Doing the right thing, however small it may seem at the time, can pave the way to great outcomes. We are the only party, the only left-of-centre party, registering in the polls who will defend sex-based rights and child protection, and we must let the people know we are on their side. Of course, it's hard to identify any party on the left of politics in Scotland or indeed elsewhere these days. Jen Bell, the exiting chair of the allegedly socialist Scottish Greens, said her Hollywood colleagues condescend and scorn the marginalised they claim to care for in service of a lie. They present no serious threat to vested interests. And what of UK Labour and their Scottish branch office? Well, they promise change, but the only change they have delivered is to out-Tory the Tories. As SDLP MP Colm Eastwood said recently at PMQs about the savage cuts to disability payments, after 14 years of the Tory government and many of us wanting to see the back of them, can the Prime Minister answer one question? What was the point if Labour is going to do this? And I could not agree more. But it's worse than just Tory austerity on Labour steroids. The Labour Party we once knew has ceased to exist. It is a shell of empty rhetoric pretending to wave the red flag. How can they claim to be the party of the people when one of the first things they did was to strip millions of pensioners of their winter fuel allowance? They then hit employers, the engine room of growth, the growth they claim to seek, with a massive national insurance double whammy by lowering the threshold and ramping up the rate, taking £25 billion out of the employment economy. And when that didn't work, they came for the disabled. We already know about the human cost of austerity, but Labour are ramping things up. In 2010, the new UK coalition government introduced a series of austerity politics in response to the global financial crisis, something the Alex Salmond government worked tirelessly to mitigate. Meanwhile, the rate of impoverishment, rate of improvement of life expectancy in these islands slowed significantly after 2010. In a 2024 London School of Economics paper looking at the cost of austerity, they set out how UK public spending cuts had led to 190,000 excess deaths. And a 2025 Institute for Fiscal Services report claimed there were 10 extra deaths of despair, that's deaths caused by alcohol, drugs or suicide, in England and Wales every single day of 2023. Throughout my life, I have witnessed the fallout and health consequences of pernicious Westminster government's poor social policy. I've seen once thriving mining communities decimated as their industry was thrown on the scrap heap. I've sat with young people who've chosen to ameliorate the pain of lost hope and opportunity with drugs and drink. I've listened while they told me how they found their young partner dead beside them from an accidental overdose. Labour's idea for growth is to bring a cohort of young people suffering from a combination of mental ill health and joblessness back into work by impoverishing them. Many refer to the Tory party as the nasty party, but Labour are putting warfare before welfare. This will come to define Starmer's government and it should haunt them forever. Their own government analysis estimates that 250,000 people will be thrust into poverty, including 50,000 additional children, and the average PIP claimant will be £4,500 worse off per year. Labour have no money for vulnerable people, but they have billions for war and bombs. Sir Keir Starmer has embraced Tory policy lock, stock and two smoking tank barrels, and by default so have his Scottish branch office. Just like Trump, they are stripping away public services, targeting the most vulnerable people in society by slashing £5 billion from disability support, schmoozing with BlackRock and protecting the super rich who have never had it so good. This tells you everything you need to know about who Sir Keir Starmer is. The party, founded on marching and protest, has now accepted draconian Tory restrictions on Article 11 rights of peaceful assembly and association. All of this economic misery will directly impact Scotland's block grant. And on the Constitution, we know Labour can't be trusted. They were willing participants in the cover-up of the Macron report while Her Majesty's Treasury prospered from Scotland's bounty. Norway stands with $1.7 trillion of a sovereign wealth fund, while Scotland is replete with fuel poverty and deprivation. It is simply not good enough, and the people of Scotland should no longer settle for a combination of robbery of our vast natural wealth, the impoverishment of our people and the decimation of our infrastructure and our economy. Enough is enough. Conference, we know we generate over 12 times our energy requirements in renewable energy alone. Offshore Energy UK claimed this week that if the sector had proper political and financial support, Scotland could produce half of the 15 billion barrels of oil that the UK would need before 2050. Yet they still claim the oil is running out. National Grid's Beyond 2030 plan will see 3 subsea cables and 1 on-land cable take Scotland's energy from our shores with no revenue and no manufacturing or supply chain jobs in return. As Alex told us before his sad passing, we cannot allow the robbery of Scotland's oil to be repeated by our renewables thievery. ALBA have a strong message for Scotland, but we must counter the legacy media blackout. As an MP, I was responsible for looking after my constituents, and as Deputy Leader, I intend to support Kenny to engage with our members and the wider movement to drive our positive message on independence forward. To that end, I will work to develop a social media campaign strategy with assistance from our talented HQ team and NEC colleagues. But we cannot make a success of this alone. I will be looking for volunteers with media skills and a passion to get the message out there. We can reignite the hope and optimism that has been stifled over recent years and drive the ALBA Party message forward. Mainstream politics is falling apart. The legacy media are losing ground, and that creates an opportunity. We can't cede that space to Nigel Farage and his Trumpian ambitions to tear down the NHS and much else. Scotland must choose the gateway of independence. Only with independence can we begin to use our vast natural wealth to build a fairer, kinder and more equal society for the benefit of our people. Let's take our message to Scotland and elect as many ALBA Party MSPs as possible. That is our mission. The only reform Scotland needs is independence. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. And with that, you've been so succinct, it's highly unusual. I don't anticipate you'll be as good tomorrow. We have a very, very full day of business tomorrow, including a debate in the afternoon. It's entitled Open Mic Session, but it's really about the strategy for 2026. And we're very keen, particularly those of you who might not feel comfortable coming up to the lectern, have the opportunity to give your views from the audience. We have the conference, Kayleigh. Well, it's due to start 6:30. I don't know if the band's here. Might as well get started straight away. But there are tickets still available, although some of you are probably heading for the pub. Right enough, can't blame you. Thank you very much indeed. We've managed to get through day one. One more day to get through. And can I thank you for the warmth in this room? You're truly lovely people. See you tomorrow.